welcome to our webinar tonight. It's lovely to have you here in the 25th Holding Space for Self and Others webinar. We've got an exciting panel discussion for you tonight. And as you join us, it's great if you can keep your camera on and keep your microphone on mute, so we've got great sound quality for tonight. My name is Jackie Short and I'm the Clinical Director of Sydney Centre for Creative Change. I'd like to welcome you here, whether you're watching this live and interactively or whether you're watching this later on our recording, you're most welcome to be here. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that I come to you from tonight, the Eora people of the Gadigal Nation, and pay collective respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome. We have an hour presentation for you tonight, and what this is going to be is 3 of our emerging creative therapists in different stages of the beginning of their career, and they're going to share a little bit with us tonight about what's drawn them to creativity and especially what's piqued their interest in creative therapies. So they're going to share a little bit about their experience. There's also going to be an opportunity later on in the webinar today for you to connect in with one other person and to reflect on how this presentation impacts you and what interests you about creativity and creative therapy. So there'll be a good chance to share with a like-minded other, and then we'll have a little reflection all together. We've got a giveaway tonight of a free webinar, not one of these free webinars, it's actually one of our paid webinars, but we're going to gift it to somebody tonight. And we've got a few announcements of some special things coming up. We've also got PD certificates available for those people who remain with us to do the quiz at the end. It's a very quick 3-question quiz, and we certainly hope you can join us and stay on board for that. If you are watching this afterwards, you can do the PD quiz online, and if you get 80% or more, so 2 out of those 3 answers correct, we'll send you a PD certificate within about a week. So likewise, if you're interested in a PD certificate, after tonight, you'll get that in about a week. And the recording of this will be edited and available also in a couple of weeks, along with all of the slides from this evening. If you'd like to revisit any of those, you're more than welcome also. So I'm going to share my screen to start with tonight and tell you a little bit more about what we're doing, and most importantly, introduce our panellists. So tonight is focusing on early career therapists sharing why they love creative therapies. And all of these 3 lovely presenters tonight are part of our volunteer support team who help us with our creative therapy online training and events. So it's a special treat to have them speaking to you tonight. Our first speaker is Scout Smith O'Leary, who has a degree in both gender studies and a graduate diploma in counselling and psychotherapy. While Scout never considered herself creative and talk therapy appeared to be the most effective method after the study that she'd done, music had always been a language that her soul understood. Whenever she found herself in challenging times, there would be the darkness, the sound and the lyrics transporting her to other worlds, other places in time and other emotions. It was through this channel of music that Scout discovered the power of music to connect, reflect her experience and ultimately to heal. She's recently started learning to play the guitar and sing, and she feels this is a huge part of her happiness, joy and contentment. So Scout will be our first speaker this evening. Grace Michail is our second speaker. Grace has a deep appreciation for creative expression. She's a 3rd-year psychology student at Macquarie University and an intern with us at Sydney Centre for Creative Change. She's growing her understanding of the creative process and its power as a tool to explore emotional complexities and psychological conflict. As someone who has cherished the sense of emotional freedom and joy that art has given her, Grace hopes to share that joy and work with children and young people impacted by trauma. And our last special speaker this evening is Areum Shin. Annie is a final year student studying psychology and fine arts at the University of New South Wales. Annie aspires to pursue these disciplines in her career to contribute to the betterment of empirical creative therapy, positive psychological intervention, and their application for adolescents. Annie is also an intern at the Sydney Centre for Creative Change with us, where she's fostering knowledge of an experience in professional and creative settings. Also an emerging Korean-Australian artist, Annie explores psychological concepts and processes through abstraction in her art-making process. So I'd like to welcome our three speakers tonight. They're each going to talk for around 10 or 15 minutes about some critical questions around creativity. And some of them have some PowerPoint presentations to share, and some of them will be interviewed by me around the questions that we've set up a bit earlier. So our first speaker tonight is Scout. So welcome, Scout.
Thank you so much, Jackie. It's a pleasure to be here, everybody.
So you've got some slides to share. Would you like to put those up now, or would you like to put them at the end? What's going to be best for you?
Yeah, I'm happy to pop them up right now.
Okay, fantastic. As I mentioned, these slides will be available for everybody later to see as well. So lovely to see your faces here as we start this presentation tonight.
So is that coming through for everybody?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, guys, my name is Scout Smith O'Leary, and basically I have always been really interested in psychology, in counselling, in therapy, because I want to understand myself. I want to understand people and what we're doing here. I'm quite an existentialist at heart, so I feel like these questions have always resonated with me, and the more that I kept sort of digging into that, the more I wanted to learn and get involved. So that's sort of what landed me here, is my curiosity to understand myself and everyone around me. And I've recently started my own business, which is called the School of Connection. And you might notice that this logo design came to me because, in essence, what I've come to conclude about our existence is that connection is in our DNA, and it brings color to our life and our existence. So that's there, and that's, you also see up there as my Love Scout. So I do a bit of matchmaking as part of my business, because I really am passionate about love and relationships and helping people form those kinds of intimate, deep bonds as well. And down the bottom is one of my speed dating events. So I'm very, very keen to help people come together in ways, giving people alternatives to Tinder, and sort of more organic connections in a sense. And all of this basically comes from these three people who have heavily inspired me. And you may know some of them, all of them, but that's Dr. Gabor Mate, whose work is informing the field of trauma and addiction, and the conclusions that he's drawn is that, connection is the opposite of addiction, and without it, it can leave us, lost for meaning and purpose, and we forget the beauty of our existence. Along with Johan Hari, who's a journalist who also writes heavily on the subject, and Russell Brand, who's had plenty of lived experience in addiction and coming to the conclusions of self-realization and actualization and the unity that's within humans that we can find. So I've built my business around a lot of the work that these people have put forward. So yeah, essentially love is at the essence of what I do and who I want to be. And I feel like there is so much beauty in being able to build friendships and build romantic relationships. And there's so much that we miss out on in life if we don't get the skills and tools to do that. And there's a lot of pain and suffering that comes from poorly managed relationships. So I just want to help people in all capacities have them healthier, stronger, and in ways that are supportive of us emotionally and psychologically. So that's a little bit about my backstory. And why do I feel that creative therapy is so important? Basically because we have so many emotions, and I don't feel that, at least in my culture, there's an adequate education around emotional intelligence, around self-recognition, around emotional regulation, around even a vocabulary to describe the way we're feeling, to describe viscerally what happens to us when we experience grief, trauma, death, loss, heartache, our language capabilities don't come close to the experience of what we go through. And while talk therapy is great, and I do love to talk my head off, don't get me wrong about that, there's just some things that I find are so hard to access within myself when I'm going through an experience. And certainly in working with clients, if there's no awareness, if there's no language, if there's no vocab, how can you even tap into what's going on for that person? And so I've put the two sides of the brain as well, because, you know, sometimes it's easier to express through art, through drawing, through paint, through sculpting, through music, through sound, through artistic, expressive ways that are just non-verbal. And I found that experience of producing or creating or being, it can help the mind interact with the emotion. Because without awareness, it's very hard to move forward with problem solving or working through challenges in therapy. And it's also great to get a new perspective on an issue, because I've certainly had this in my experience, and I'm sure you're the same, where intellectually we can understand things. You know, we can understand what it means when a person dies. But emotionally, physically, in the heart space, in the body, it's another experience. And there's levels to our experience of pain and emotion. And sometimes it's harder to get past the intellectual. So I find creative is really important for digging down under the surface and really getting to the bottom of stuff. But in saying that, it's also really nice to just be able to process in your own way, and sometimes not have to excavate and dig up, and just allow the expression to be what it is. So that's why I find it really important. And now I'd love to talk to you about one specific therapy that I use, as I'm very passionate about music. And this is something that I've used on myself, with friends, with clients before. It doesn't have a name, but I'm going to talk you through the process. So essentially, I would ask the client beforehand to choose a song that was meaningful to them, or that resonated with them, that was reflective of what they were going through. And generally, people can identify music and identify their feelings through sound and through song. So I'd ask them to bring that to a session, and then ideally we would listen to it together. I'd ask them to sit down, get comfortable, perhaps even lie down. I'd offer to turn the lights off so we could really come together in the sound, and just be absorbed by the music. So I would have the experience with the client, kind of an experiential intimacy of listening to what's going on for them through somebody else. So it's quite a passive way of setting the tone of what's going on for them. And then from that, I would either give them a copy of the lyrics printed, or I would ask them to bring them in. And then they would take a pen and they would redact the lyrics. So I'd say, you just need to black out what's not relevant, and just leave behind the words that are meaningful to you. So they would sit there and go through, and as you can see, my little example about redacted text. And so what you're left with are a bunch of words that are in some capacity significant to your client. Third step, I would ask them to take the words and then create something of their own from it, whether it was a little poem, a couple of sentences, it might be a story, it might just be a list. But really, again, letting them sit and sync with whatever's resonating for them. And the fourth step, I would just ask about what's the significance of what they've come up with, what they've created, and reflect on the process as a whole. So from start to finish, and taking them through these in essence, 5 steps of using something that they know, something that they're familiar with, something that's relevant to them, and it's going to help create this language and this dialogue that's already half been written, but they've taken what's relevant for them. And we forget the power of music and the power of mood, and somebody speaking to us when we're going through that same experience can be really, really healing and transformative. So that would be one of my favorite creative therapy methods that I use, particularly with people who aren't very interested in talking, don't know how to talk, don't know where to start. Again, if they don't have the emotional awareness or the vocabulary, it's a beautiful place to use another artist's work to start that conversation rolling. So how is this a benefit? Well, as so many people have said before, music is a world within itself, and it's a language we all understand. It's universal. We don't need words. We don't need to worry about being misinterpreted or miscommunicated. I mean, the power of sound to make us feel something, to stir up emotions, is something that most of us can relate to. And it's quite easy to sense with clients if they are, passionate about music. And I feel like this is one of the things we're always trying to do in therapy, is build up that therapeutic alliance. So not everyone will be passionate about it, but if you do find somebody, you go, oh, do you listen to music? What kind of music? And their face lights up, like that's a green light for your therapeutic alliance. And I would always try to strengthen that and use what's comfortable, what's known, what's familiar to the client. It's going to help them build trust to you. It's going to help them feel like you get them, which that feeling is invaluable to the relationship. And, I always have like a genuine interest in knowing what people are passionate about, what kind of music they love, what that song means to them. And then I will go and listen to that song with that new significance on it and just appreciate what it means to the person, in a way that sometimes it's harder to have those deeper conversations. So I've worked with a lot of international adults in my time, and people who don't have English as a first language, and it's such a powerful communicator I found in my experience working with those particular individuals. So that's how I would say it's of benefit. And look, in growing my skills in creative therapy, I think there's a lot more to explore and experience with music and sound, and also with creation. I love creating poetry and songs and lyrics. And I think if there can be collaboration and creativity with music and with healing, that would be wonderful. And I know a few years back, they released a documentary about Alzheimer's and the power of music in healing. And that was incredible. But also, I would love to learn more about sand tray and cymbal work, because I've had incredibly profound experiences as a client and as a counselor with this particular modality. And I went into a grief workshop completely skeptical. And what can I say? That I was just absolutely turned upside down. What I thought was child's play, looking into a sandbox, sort of dove into my subconscious before I could blink, and had really profound and lasting impacts on insights, even when I thought I was fairly self-aware. So there's some real power to symbols that I would like to explore further. So that's all from me, guys. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope I've given you something to work with.
Thank you, Scout. That was a great reflection on your feelings about creativity and what you're particularly drawn to in relation to creative therapy as well, and lovely to hear from you. We're going to have some time for questions at the end, so if you did want to ask Scout anything in particular and you think you might forget it, feel free to pop it in the chat and we'll read it out a little bit later on, but hold on to those questions because now we're going to hear from Grace. Grace, thank you for being here tonight as well, and looking forward to hearing from you. If you also wanted to share your screen, that would be great, and we can see your slides as you reflect on your history of creativity and what's drawn you to be an intern also with us in our support team this year, and what attracts you about creative therapy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I'll just share my screen. Can everyone see that okay?
Perfect.
So I'm Grace. It's very nice to meet all of you. I'm a student right now studying psychology, but I am also of Egyptian and Sudanese ethnicity, which I don't always bring up, but it's kind of important, I guess, for me in figuring out where creativity is for me. It was a big kind of step in branching out from different kinds of ideas about lifestyle and sort of where I should be in my life right now. So it was really kind of, well, I'll get to it. I'll get to it anyway. So I study psychology and I paint as a hobby, and I also teach children's art classes. So when I'm studying psychology, I've been able to like see lots of different parts of psychology. It's a very, very broad field. And I'm really quite interested in personality and trauma, but also still art and creative writing. So learning about creative therapy was sort of finding like a really happy medium between the two. So I'm really excited to keep learning about it. So why is creativity important to me? So it was always something very central for me as a kid, just learning like different bits and pieces as hobbies, always sketching around or painting with my siblings, or learning from my grandfather how to etch mugs. That was really, really important for him. And as a migrant, it was kind of cool that he just set up this little mug etching kind of family business sort of thing in the garage. So very cool to keep learning from that. And also just learning to sew from my grandmother. Those were moments and memories that I have of just growing up, but being here now and older and kind of reflecting on why creativity and art is so important to me. It has really strong family ties. So yeah. And in terms of creative therapy, I think it's so important just because it reaches so many people, and it's such an emotional escape and support. And there are so many people that I've met and so many people like of my generation and my just friends who really are struggling with difficulties and hardships and their own mental health. And music or art or even creative writing were already like creative spaces that they were already involved in. They were like actively going in and participating in those things, and nobody had really kind of joined the dots of being able to use those things that we just call hobbies as a way to get through what is really difficult in the moment. So I think that creative therapy, from what I've experienced and understood and been learning about, it's just a really easy and smooth transition or way to take a hobby or a passion and to be able to work through the kind of difficult moments of life, which, you know, are very common. So yeah, this is just some of my artwork that's up right now. Most of them actually happened in just moments where I didn't know what the right words to say were, or what I was even kind of like struggling with. Sometimes I don't know about you guys, but I tend to overthink a lot. So things just kind of get messy up there. And it just seems to come out on the page much more easily than through words. So a creative therapy method that I use in self-care is accessibility. This for me looks like mess. It is a mess. But being able to have all my creative tools really accessible, and having the mediums I'm drawn to, things, they're quite tangible, things like the paint or charcoal or just really hard mediums. it just kind of keeps that invitation to go into the space and to work with it, and to kind of step away from, well, all of the overthinking, or stepping away from the stress or the struggles that's kind of overwhelming in the moment. It just keeps that invitation to go into the space and walk away from wherever I am really, really open. And I like to keep everything really visually central. So when I'm just in my room, sorry, I should have said that I've actually converted part of my room into a little art studio, and that's what those pictures are of. Just kind of crammed an art desk in there so that I could have all my materials with me to just jump up at any moment. And that was really, really useful during COVID, when we were doing online classes and online work and everybody was in quarantine. It was so nice to just kind of jump up from one thing, quickly paint something, or sketch out something really, really quickly, and then jump back into work or study or whatever it was. And it was just a really, like, having the space set up that way, where everything was open and in front of me, just, it was kind of freeing a little bit to be able to jump between the two, and it really put me in two different headspaces. So it was great. So I definitely loved having that around. Oh, sorry. So I also, the other thing that I do, I guess, in self-care, is making sure that when I'm painting, I'm focusing on the textures and the mediums themselves rather than what I'm painting, which is really, I think, is a like really common tool that we use in creative therapy, especially in art therapy. So having the textures and stuff heavily on my mind, it's kind of representing what's going on for me inside, and so that I can just sort of see the mess and see the clutter of the space, and then know that maybe I've got mess and clutter in my mind, but I'm ready to accept it, and I'm okay to work through it. And it's also a little bit linked to my faith. So when I'm overwhelmed, it's kind of difficult to say prayer or feel spiritually connected, or just connected in general. But I found that when you just focus on the medium, or just focus on one part of the painting, one part of the creative measure, then everything else just gets a little bit more quiet, and it's easier to feel a little bit more grounded, or a little bit more connected in some way. So yeah. And so what would I like to grow my skills in, or where to from here kind of thing. I'd really like to learn a bit more about how to invite other people through that space. I think I still have a lot to learn about myself and who I am with creative therapy and that sort of thing. But there are so many people around me that are kind of struggling, and it gets difficult not to be able to work with them, or uplift them in that way. So I'd love to learn what are the skills and what are the different things that we can do together to kind of stay positive and stay up. Yeah. And I'd also really think it's important to learn the skills to identify the like particular things that are kind of weighing us down, because a lot of the time it just seems really, really broad and really like everything's a mess, when really it's just one thing that's kind of really annoying us, or one thing that's causing all of the stress. So I'd really like to learn more about creative therapy in terms of trauma, where that is also the case. And then working with children in specifically as well, because I think that we could use it as a preventative measure almost in addressing the emotional complexity or hardship in a preventative way, rather than just as treatment. So yeah, that's me.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Grace. I think certainly I'm sure the art classes that you're running for the children that you work with go a long way to prevent some of those kids struggling as much as they might have otherwise. So that's really lovely to hear about the work that you're doing and your interests and what you'd like to move into doing as well. So thank you for presenting also. Likewise, if you have questions for Grace you'd like to ask her later, feel free to either pop those in the chat or remember those, and we'll have some time for reflections at the end and questions. And our last panel presenter tonight is Annie. Welcome, Annie. Great to have you here.
Hello, thanks for having me. I apologize for my voice, which has gone croaky in the past few days. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And I am currently studying psychology as well. Just finished my studies in fine arts recently. And yeah, I'm an emerging artist working across painting, sculpture, and installation. And yeah, I've always had a deep interest into the human mind and our ability to make and making to heal. And yeah, I'm currently interning with the Centre to investigate further into my career options, and also interning at a ceramic studio in Glebe to keep inspired and hone in my art making skills. So yeah, lovely to be here. And yeah.
Annie, why is creative therapy important to you, do you think?
So I think the embedded question was that, why is creativity, first of all, important? So yeah, creativity, first of all, in the sense, has always been an important part of my life. And it's been an outlet to gauge myself as an individual, unique to anyone else. And now it's more of an outlet for me to express abstract ideas or my internalizations, and I guess most importantly to heal myself. And yeah, because I've been brought up in a culture that encourages internalizing and keeping things to oneself, gauging my creativity has always let me heal through expressing and acknowledging and giving form to things that are difficult to otherwise externalize. And it's also been a form of small rebellion and escape from what others expect me to do with life. And I guess going ahead with creative therapy and why it's important for me, yeah, it's something worthy of my pursuit to bridge the greatest two interests in my life, which is the mind, mental health, and with art and creativity. And yeah, I've always been drawn to these two things. And I was always wondering, is there a way to merge them together or explore them both at the same time? And creative therapy is exactly that for me. And it's important for my personal research into myself and others as well. How creativity is not only a tool for making, but for the making of the self, healing of the self, and introspection. And as I've been researching, I guess, into more journals and more empirical studies and clinical trials, and seeing them emerge in the creative therapy field, I see its significance and application for the wider public become more solid and concrete. And I believe creative therapy has the power to make people engage in therapy without fearing the upfront clinical image of therapy, especially for, I guess, for anyone, for younger and older individuals alike who hold that assumption about creative therapy. So yeah.
Fantastic. And is there a specific creative therapy method or technique or activity you find particularly useful as part of your self-care?
Yeah, so lately, although I do make art on the side, but lately writing has been an important form of therapy for me, specifically to ground myself in the moment. So it's a bit of self-narrative therapy, a personalized grounding exercise. And yeah, it's just been a whole new learning and healing experience working with, I guess, normally the abstract to heal myself, but then putting my thoughts and internalizations into words, something more concrete and defined. So to describe what this exercise looks like, to ground myself with writing, I will first do 2 minutes of, first of all, getting used to the pen, writing out all the gunk and the junk inside my head, or in more professional terms, my ruminations. Sometimes these look like doodles and drawings, but anything to resonate with the pen that I'm holding, and preparing myself, I guess, physiologically to write as a means for expression. And then once those thoughts are out and externalized, I would then engage in more intentional writing after a short breathing exercise if I still don't feel ready to write and put into words what is within me. So first, I will list things I can't change or things that haven't happened yet. And yeah, I will just list those things because my ruminations look like, I guess, an endless cycle of lists. So I will reciprocate that in my writing. So first I'll write things that I cannot change. And then second, I will list things that I can change, or the things that I wish for, but I have control over. So I do that to bring myself to the present moment a bit more. and I will use more time to dwell on the second part. And finally, I will list things that I'm thankful for, the things that I've already have in the present, to bring me down to where I am in my life in this moment today, or within the week, or within the hour. And yeah, sort of end my exercise there. So it's a very short, or as long as you make it to be. But I guess this benefits me in my self-care because I find myself ruminating things from the past or way into the future and getting myself lost and anxious on things that I can't change or has not even happened yet. And yeah, grounding myself with this short exercise has been making my mind more decluttered, especially as a person who internalizes everything. So instead of listing things endlessly in my head, it's the act and movement of writing and my body trying to express and externalize the internal. And yeah, as a person who works with abstract art daily, it challenges me to, I guess in a healthy manner, to build my skills in expressing myself in a way that could be understood better for myself and for others as well.
Fantastic, Annie. Thank you for sharing that exercise.
I guess more importantly, it helps me to focus on the task at hand. Pardon?
Sorry to interrupt you there.
No, that's okay.
Just thank you for your frank sharing of that and the example of the benefit it has for you, as well as what the steps are for that very concrete writing exercise. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I guess something that was cut off in, it just helps me to focus on the task at hand, or just even the day ahead, the moment and the space that I'm in, instead of being caught up in the past or the future. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And that's how it's been really helping me ground myself daily. Yeah,
wonderful. How would you like to grow your skills in and uses of creative therapy moving into the future? Yeah,
I had to think about this one for a bit because I have so many things that I want to explore and grow in. But lately, I've been growing more deep interest in creative therapy methods that use more sensory ways of expression by using clay or sand especially, which I have been investigating in my own art making as well. And I have been inviting participants to, I guess, use the sensory mediums to, I guess, engage in healing oneself in a more creative way. But I want to look into these from a more clinical perspective. And I guess secondly, I would love to grow my skill in exercising these methods with adolescent clients in the future, possibly, or with myself as I continue to study and explore.
Wonderful. Thank you, Annie, for those wonderful frank sharings as well, and really practical look at how you use creativity and creative therapy to help yourself with self-care, but what your goals and aims are for the future as well. That's really lovely. Thank you for all our panellists. We've had some really great insights tonight as into why emerging therapists and those starting their careers potentially are so enamoured of creative therapies. It's really lovely to hear. And I can see some comments coming through the chat. We do have, as I mentioned, some time for questions at the end. Before we move to that, what I'd like to do also is to just very briefly share, these are the questions that we just asked the panel. And these are some questions that I might ask you to reflect on, who you are and what you do, and why creativity or creative therapy might be important to you. So I'll give you an opportunity in around 10 minutes to connect in with one person. We're going to set up some breakout rooms, and it would be great if you could have your cameras on at that time to be able to connect in with one other person and to share your reflections on this evening, and also what creativity and creative therapy might mean for you at whatever stage in your career you might be. So we're going to do that in about 5 or 10 minutes. I'd also like to very briefly share my story about creative therapy and how I got into this sort of work. I'm certainly not a new clinician. I've been working in the field for a little while, but I started out as a counselling psychologist, really feeling that I had no idea whatsoever in how to counsel people or how to be a psychologist. I did 4 years of an undergraduate degree, and while I had the credentials, certainly didn't feel like I had confidence. And I worked in many different roles. I worked in drug and alcohol settings. I worked with children in school counselling. But it wasn't until I discovered play therapy and creative therapies that I started to realize that I didn't have to sit and look at a child on a chair and ask them 1,000 questions in order to be able to do therapy. In fact, I found that very awkward, and kids often found that really awkward too. So it wasn't until I started exploring other forms of creative and expressive therapies and got good at doing those, or reasonable at doing those, that I felt confident in being able to really do the clinical work that I'd always wanted to do. I always wanted to be a counsellor. I knew I wanted to be a psychologist fairly early on in life, and was really inspired when I started studying and practicing different forms of creative and expressive therapies. And my role at the moment is more training and supervision than it is clinical work. I still do a little bit of that, but mostly it's running training workshops, and predominantly online at the moment. Some people might recognise themselves in some of these fun online things that we did last year. And I also manage our support team of volunteers, and some of those people are here tonight as well. That was a fun picture we took at the end of last year, just before the expo when we were planning that. I'm also a part of a play therapy community, which allows me to do some of the fun things I love to do, and that's dress up and have a bit of fun and meet like-minded fun people. So this was a conference that we had a couple of years ago, and not surprisingly, it was a Mad Hatter theme, Alice in Wonderland themed conference, which was great fun. So I get to carry lots and lots of materials and set up for stalls and training in a really practical and fun and creative way that I enjoy. And this was setting up our drink me in the back end the night before the conference was to start. So really, I enjoy kind of that fun preparatory kind of work as well. Creativity and creative therapy is important to me because it always has been. This is a photo of me and my sister Penny when we were very young, and Santa bought us this amazing kitchen set. As you can see, I was a child of the 70s in that matching lovely jumpsuit with my sister, and we had so much fun, and we made so many things on that stove and washed up in that sink behind my sister there. So my childhood consisted of lots of pretend play, craft, theatre, painting and dolls. And so creativity and creative play and imagination was always a really big part of my upbringing, and it still continues to be. I enjoy dress-up parties. This was some pictures of my 50th birthday party. They're my siblings. Zena, the theme of my 50th was to dress up as something you wanted to be when you grow up. And my brother wanted to be James Bond. One of my sisters wanted to be the Bluebird of Happiness. I wanted to be a Bollywood dancer, and I'm still hoping I might be, just quietly. And my other sister there wanted to be Xena, the warrior woman, which is quite sweet. And his two school friends as well. Helen here wanted to be a Jedi Knight. She's still working on that. And my other friend Jane wanted to be an ambulance driver. A specific creative therapy method or technique or activity I find useful is impossible for me to define or describe, because I find so many so powerful in the work that I do. Still counselling with children, with adolescents and with adults, and also running training and supervision. So I find play therapy important. I find sand play an important way of being able to externalise and express and dive into the unconscious, as Scout was reflecting on. That art therapy opens all sorts of doors again into other worlds that don't involve verbal expression. That through the creation of or the telling of stories, we can identify again in an externalized and safe and fun and an imaginative way what is happening and what could be happening. Drama therapy allows us to embody and enact in a way that can be fun, that can be quiet, but again is about putting out there that which is in here. And music is also an incredibly powerful way, both in the creation of it and in the listening to it, that can take us to completely new places. I would like to continue to grow my skills in uses of creative therapies, in continuing to run some of the training programs that we do. So we've got a graduate certificate in play and art therapy, which is a small group and a very intensive 6 months of training that involve lots of hands-on practice in creative therapies. That when we do have face-to-face training, and hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later, that it is practical and dynamic and as fun as we can possibly make it, and really connecting and applied, and offers certification and usefulness at the end of the day as well. So I really enjoy running practical training programs where people do the work and don't just hear about it. I also believe that creative therapies is suitable for all ages, whether we're working with children, adolescents or adults. we can find ways of helping people express things that might be too hard to express just then through words. I believe that creative therapy can encompass many forms of creative expression, from play to construction, to sandplay, to music, to imagination, and even physical forms of music, movement, and drama. And it's suitable for a variety of presenting issues for all ranges. So there's a couple of contraindications, but many, many forms of presenting issues that we might see in therapy: anxiety, depression, challenges with neurological disorders can all be benefited from these forms of creative expression. So what I'd like to give you the opportunity to do now is to, Ada's going to put you into a breakout room in just a moment. So we're going to have groups of 2 or maybe groups of 3, and you'll get an opportunity to meet with at least one other person. So what I'd encourage you to do in the 5 or 10 minutes we've got for those small groups is to introduce yourself to the people in your group and to tell them where you are and what you're doing and how creativity is of interest to you. If you are currently doing any form of creative therapy work, what it is you do and what most interests or inspires you. So if I could give you some chance to share with one another, that would be great. And at the end of those breakout rooms, we're going to automatically pull you back. We'll give you a 1-minute warning so you know it's the time's nearly up. And then after that minute, we're going to have a check-in with a couple of people who might want to reflect on what it is that you spoke about. And maybe something in one of the presentations tonight has also piqued your interest. So feel free to reflect on that for a little bit if you'd like to as well. So we've got a little bit of time to connect in. And then when we come back from those breakout rooms, we're going to have some a little activity, and one person will have a chance to win one of our upcoming webinars, and we'll do a quick quiz at the end and then finish up with thank you and farewell. So we're going to go into those breakout rooms just now, and I'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. That opportunity that you've just taken to connect in with 1 or 2 other people and to reflect on your own creative process or use of creative therapy. Would anyone like to share anything that they discussed very briefly in their small group there?
I would, Jackie.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Are you? Sorry, who? I'm not quite sure who's speaking. Kirsten. Kirsten, are you able to put your camera on? I
don't. I'm actually on my phone and it's not really all that working at the moment.
Oh, okay. So yeah, no worries. That's okay. Yep.
Look, I don't know whether it's serendipity or not, but I was in the room with Andrea Michail. We've both just enrolled in the same counselling, a grad dip course in JCU. It looks like we're going to both be doing the same study, starting very, very soon, which was just wonderful to have actually met somebody who's on the same kind of trajectory that I am. But as well, similar ideas about what is available in terms of training and workshops. Like within the unis, it's so theory-based, whereas what you guys offer, I mean, I've loved the workshops and the training and things that I've found with you over the last 18 months. So we both agreed that having that creative outlet and being able to use that in counselling and therapy and schools and whatever is invaluable. It's, and what you've got on offer is so necessary. It's very, very hard to find quality workshops in that space.
Great. Well, glad you're able to join us, and hope you can continue. And very serendipitous that you managed to get in a breakout room with someone you're about to start a course with. That's fantastic. Thank you for that sharing. What I'd like to do, we've only got a minute or so to go, and I know that that you've all probably had a big day wherever you are, but does anyone have any questions for anyone on our panel? Anyone want it? You can put your hand up if you'd like to and unmute and ask any of the panel a question, or pop it into the chat if you'd like to. I'll get you to join me in thanking them in just a moment, but Janaki, is it? Would you like to, did you have a question? I'll just get you to unmute if you'd like to.
Yes, sorry. Okay, first of all, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jackie, for having me. I'm a very beginner. I just finished my one counseling course. I'm trying to register with SCA and try to find out, the options, how I can build PD and the skills. That's why I registered this one this afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. I have just only one question that we also discussed in the group. In our group, we had Annie, Mingle, and myself, and Annie explained lots of things in front of everyone before. Mingle also explained, like when we do the counseling as a counselor, we also need to have a couple of therapy skills, because the therapist goes side by side to the counseling. I was also thinking how we can integrate the counseling process and the couple of therapies, and the therapies, everybody will not be eligible to perform all kind of therapies, but sort of normal therapies. What type of therapies can be integrated with the general counseling process? This is what the question I was thinking myself in the beginning, and today I got this opportunity to ask. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. I'm sure you discussed that a little bit in your small group, which is great. But to very briefly answer that question, I think that there is a range of different counselling methods that can be integrated with different forms of creative therapy. Most forms of creative therapy work have had their origins in the psychoanalytic or the psychodynamic realms. Mm-hmm. So if we have specific training in that, we can use those methods. But much of our training centres around either the humanist, person-centred existential approaches, or the more directive, solution-focused or strength-based ways of working. So they're the two main ways that we work, but there's really, most forms of therapy can be integrated with different forms of creative therapy. And that's one of the things that we really love to do here. So thank you for coming tonight. We have a quick quiz that I'd like to lead you through at the end. But before we do that, I'd like to show you what we've got coming up, and to also give you the chance to win one of these events as well. So some of our training that we have coming up, tomorrow night and the night after, I'm doing an introduction to art therapy, practical methods for children, young people and adults. That's a 6-hour course over those 2 nights. We also have a fabulous 3-day, 3 half-day therapeutic storytelling workshop, and it's a full story writing process. So you get to write your own therapeutic story. And Susan Perro is running that for us 3 mornings in July coming up. You can register for that online as well. The graduate certificate in play and art therapy I mentioned a bit earlier has its August intake coming up very soon, in a few months, and you can check out the website for further details about that application process. Thank you so much for being here. If you could all please join me in thanking our fantastic panel tonight, Scout, Grace and Annie, and thank you very much, and thank you Ada for hosting for us tonight as well. So thank you for being here, and look forward to seeing you next time. All the best. Bye now.